Ben, great to see you, man. How's it going?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. It's not often we do a podcast where the star is in the background. How's Indy doing?
I mean, Indy's great. He doesn't know he was in a movie. He doesn't know he's on a call right now. He doesn't know he just did a press tour, but he's having a great time.
I feel like that's the best way to be a celebrity is just to be completely unaware of it.
Totally. He's about as method as you can be. He's completely disappeared into the character.
Yeah, it's awesome. What kind of breed is it? It's like a duck hunting dog?
So it's a duck toller. He's a kind of retriever. Think of it as a small golden. I think a lot of people are surprised at how small he is, having seen him on the big screen when, his
Yeah.
face is 60 feet across. He's quite small in reality. He's only 19 inches tall and he's 35 pounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's
Um,
a beautiful breed. I'd never heard of him until I saw the trailer. And I was like, what kind of dog? I feel like, when 101 Dalmatians came out, tons of kids were getting Dalmatians because of
yeah,
that movie, which is sucks because they're really aggressive dogs.
right.
But I feel like Good Boy I think that this breed is probably going to see a resurgence.
I have tried to be careful in terms of mentioning that he's a very smart breed. He's very intelligent. He's not just a small golden retriever where it's like it's a totally different personality, very high energy, very high drive, great to make a movie with, but
Yeah.
not like a word of caution, but just like it's maybe not what you're expecting. And he's certainly not a breed that I can recommend to detect ghosts with.
Oh man. Okay, well that's good to know. But well, huge congratulations. I was saying this earlier, but I feel like your story is one that I really like to profile. The type of story I really like to profile on this podcast. You did something fresh, interesting, very new. You did it. It was a very much a DIY element to it. And here we are 5 years later. How long did it take to make the movie?
Yeah, so we started filming in 2021, and we filmed over the course of 3 years. Across that 3 years, we believe it was, over 400. It was definitely over 400 days of filming. I don't have the exact number because you tend
Wow.
to lose track over that much time. Um, but yeah, it was a long time coming, very long to actually execute the filming, and then we spent years just before indie even existed, kind of cracking the story. The how do you tell a story with a character who can't say a line of dialogue and can't discover exposition like a human character or can't open doors? Those are limitations, but they're also opportunities, and it took a while to figure out how to embrace them.
Yeah, well, it's huge congratulations. I know the movie was very successful at the box office. I was happy to just see that something this indie, no pun intended, got a theatrical, but you guys did beautiful at the box office. So huge congratulations. This is the kind of success story I really love to see. So really happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, we owe a ton of credit to the folks who, like put together like the trailer especially, which people responded to so positively. And that really helped, put butts in seats and, make the success it has been.
Yeah, the trailer was a big catalyst for you getting the theatrical, right? The trailer just
Mhm.
went really viral and people
That's
really
when we
took to it.
moved it from it was a more limited release and moved it to wide. Just the response to the trailer, the chatter it caused, the concern over whether Indy's character would make it through the movie, which is great. You want people to be invested in your hero, and it turns out a dog protagonist. Audiences don't need to know a thing about him. They're just like, I love that guy. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. Which, when you're making horror movies, you want audiences rooting and cheering for your hero. So having a canine protagonist, which audiences are immediately invested in, it's all upside.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there's so much concern about whether, animals live or die. Everyone cares if the dog dies. Nobody seems to care if a cat dies. Like in Smile, okay, in one bedroom, cats die. People, whatever. But I
Yeah,
mean, both upset me, but still, it's
totally.
kind of a funny thing.
I think it's that dogs are innocent in a way that like almost nothing else can be. Like a person, can't be truly innocent and pure and good the way that a dog that just loves his person unconditionally can be. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what powers this movie is just it's not a complicated story in some ways. Indy as a protagonist doesn't have a huge emotional arc. He just loves this guy that he shares his house with, and he would do anything to protect him, and everything just rolls out of that.
Yeah. Well, what was the foundation of the sort of foundational idea that led you to make this movie?
Yeah, so fortunately I journal and diary all my ideas for stories and thoughts on films I'm watching. And I can trace the origin of this back to sitting in a auditorium in 2012, watching Poltergeist for probably the millionth time,
Hmm.
and thinking, after watching the opening, if you remember, there's a golden retriever that, before we've even met the humans, we start on the family dog wandering through the house, clearly
Yeah.
clued to the haunting before the humans have caught on.
Ebaz, I
But
think. It's some weird ass name.
Buzz, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, but yeah, I thought somebody should tell a story entirely from that dog's point of view. Not necessarily poltergeist from the dog's perspective, but that trope in horror movies of the dog who always knows better. A family
Hmm.
buys a house that was just too good of a deal, and isn't that weird? The dog won't go into the basement. Hey, why is the dog always barking in the backyard at that neighbor who's out late at night digging? That idea that there's a dog who kind of has detected the dark force that the audience relates to. He usually doesn't make it out of Act One, and the story becomes about the family. I thought, let's tell the story entirely from that dog's perspective.
Interesting. And then how did you start technically thinking about it? Because there's a lot of sort of technical challenges of doing a movie this way. How did it start to formulate?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I started writing the film, and I was working with a co-writer, Alex Cannon, who I'd been working with for years, we figured we should kind of test out this visual language we knew we were going to rely on. The film is all told from this unique point of view character, and without the benefit of dialogue, the perspective has to be the thing that drives kind of the engine of the narrative. So I started out by just recreating scenes that worked without dialogue from existing movies. So one of the first things I did was remade a scene from The Shining, shot for shot. Instead of Danny going to room 237, discovering the door is open, I recreated that, but with Indy. A ball rolls up to him, he looks into a hallway, and we just do that shot, reverse shot. But what I was trying to figure out is, how do you maintain that visual language while working with an actor who doesn't know he's in a movie? So
Mm.
with a person, you can say, walk to a space, hit this mark, look to your left, then you pretend to hear a noise and you'll quickly look right. And then we'll show a door, opening on its own. With a dog, you can't have that conversation of instructions. So you have to kind of create all these stimuli that happen in concert with a camera, focus pulling, the tilting, and, choreography of it all needs to work intuitively for a dog. And then you need to be able to plan for that and then also adapt to the new things the dog does. So I started there, recreating scenes from existing films and then making short films based on scares from the feature film. One of those short films won an award, and Indy was nominated for an acting
Oh, wow.
category. And by that time, I had really learned both technically how to film this with, like, in some cases, very unique dog specific gear. Not gear that was tailor made for dogs, but things I
Right.
adapted to him. And then also found a very novel way to direct him. And I'm putting that in air quotes because you're not really directing him. You're making a movie around Indy and creating a performance in the edit and doing things that, like, create an illusion of a performance. Um, and we decided, let's give it a full try and spend 3 years filming this.
Wow. So you were basically able to have somewhat of a prototype version of the movie that you were able to test ahead of time, which is really smart.
Yeah, so I was testing both, how does Indy work as an actor? Will people respond to him the way I think they will? He's my own dog, so I'm already obsessed with him and in love with him. But will audiences like him, want to follow his story? And then in the short film, will this one big jump scare work? And that's something I tried. The scene in the feature film where he's laying at the foot of the bed and there's a jump scare. I don't know if I want to spoil anything, but something big happens. We tried that in a short film first to make sure it landed, and it did in both cases.
Oh, very cool. So you would just go to the festivals, sit and watch it in a theater with people and just somatically feel what works, what doesn't, and then crafted the feature around that.
Totally. I mean, we didn't try every single scene with like a new
Right.
audience. But yeah, I mean, it's great, not even for festivals, but just making these little scenes while I was making those shorts to get ready to make the feature. And then as I was making the feature, I'd always kind of strategically like go to a friend of mine who knew what I was doing but didn't know the story, and just watch this little no dialogue scene, maybe not even with the final sound or music, and see if a jump scare was landing, see if the gasp happened at the right moment. Um, Always great to have test audiences to kind of, you know, figure that stuff out as you're making it. And since we made it for so long, we had the ability to really do that.
Yeah, it's smart. I mean, I feel like when it comes to horror specifically, a lot of people compare horror to comedy. And I always think of
100%.
stand-up comedians, the real ones, the real hardworking ones. When they're doing a special, they'll test their jokes out for a year. They'll go
Yeah.
to drop in on comedy clubs, see what works, what doesn't, iterate, rewrite accordingly. Well, horror filmmakers should consider doing the same thing. It sounds like that's what you did. You test the they
Yeah.
test the laughs, you test the scares.
Totally. I mean, and I think there's a lot of the same way that you were right to compare horror and comedy because I think they structurally work the same way with like a setup, anticipation, an
Yep.
escalation, a punchline, and maybe a second punchline you really didn't see coming. That's the same anatomy of a jump scare or a set piece in a horror movie. It's just a matter of perspective, whether it feels like it should result in a laugh or a scream. So yeah, so I write out the scares into the script with a lot of detail. I storyboard them and floor plan them. I'll mock them up, kind of making an animatic ahead of time. And then as I start filming them, working with Indy or working very slowly, only getting a few shots a day. So I can kind of create them slowly and like continue to refine and sand, test show them to audiences to make sure they're working the right way. It's not the same way someone practices a tight five, but it's not totally dissimilar.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, what was your can you tell us about a typical day when shooting? What was your crew like?
Yeah.
Do you have call times, or are you basically just at the mercy of what the dog feels like doing at any point in time?
The entire production is built around Indy, and we didn't have call times, and we didn't really have a crew. You're looking at them. We made the movie really as a family project,
Okay.
which is not to say we didn't have a lot of other collaborators who helped, especially in post production. And I had a co-writer I was writing the film with, and a lot of people advising. But the physical, hands-on recording of the footage that made the film was majority captured by just me, my wife, and Indy. The house you see in the film was the house we lived in. We did that so Indy would treat the location like his own home. Again, he can't really act. He's method as you can get. And there's things we wanted to get that he would do naturally in a place he lived that he wouldn't do in a, standard, location that we show up to. Similarly, every other person on set is just another distraction. We had to keep
Yeah.
things as calm and quiet as possible to kind of make sure he seemed natural and was comfortable and we could move at his pace. So the day would start with me, getting up and editing the last night's footage because almost the
Mhm.
whole film takes place at night. That's both a creative and kind of practical necessity that I made the movie on nights and weekends because that worked for my wife and I's schedule. So I'd begin the day editing the previous night's footage, see how that was slotting in with the rest of the scene or film part of the film I was working on. And then I would spend the day setting up for that evening's shot, really planning that we're ever only going to get one shot a day. And maybe the 30% of the time, that shot isn't even going to work, which is hard, but the dog is an enormous X factor.
Yeah, of
I spend the
course.
day setting up the lights, finding the right frame. I have a stuffed animal version of Indy called Findy that I use as his stand in. And
Okay.
the reason I would use that as kind of the lighting model it's just that Indy's attention span was our most precious resource. And if you waste it on stand-in time, that's however many less minutes you have to actually work with him, when the
Sure.
time is right. So I would, move the props around, move the set deck to kind of build the shot just in front of camera. Most of our shots are stationary where the camera is locked off. And we did a lot of things at deep focus, both for practical reasons and also because Indy can't hit an exact mark. So you have to consider that as well. Um, Sun goes down. My wife finishes her day job, and we get ready to roll. We bring Indy in, position him on his first mark. I would frequently roll the camera, and then I also stood in as Todd. I play Todd's body, and then Shane Jensen, the actor, does the voice.
Hmm.
So I would roll the camera, run around, and be in the scene. And then what I was saying to Indy to get him to perform, again, air quotes, was never the actual lines of dialogue Todd would say. It would be
Okay.
encouragement or like audio cues to get him to look a certain way, maybe quickly look left or right. Um, Frequently, my wife would be like hiding behind a box or a rack of coats to maybe give Indy a second mark to like prompt him to do something. And we would try that, 8, 9, 10, 20 times, and that would probably be the shot we would get for the day.
Wow.
And we just did that day after day, kind of slowly chipping away at this over the course of years.
My God. Did you have to get really adept at training your dog? Like, is your dog extra well trained, or was it just a matter of working within however your dog is acting at the at a time?
So it was a combination of things. I would say he's not especially well trained. I think a lot of people expect him to be incredibly obedient and maybe know like hundreds of tricks. And he certainly is very, very smart. That's key. And eager to work and eager to please. He loves having a job. But most of his performance we get by kind of engaging his natural curiosity. So if you imagine, so much of the film is powered by this very intense gaze he has, where he's not really doing a whole lot, but he's focused on something. Um, if you marry that kind of intense focus shot in a close up or whatever it is to
Mhm.
a point of view shot of maybe a shadow moving across a wall, you can create a performance essentially through the edit. Um, and suggest how Indy's feeling through the sound, the music, the shot size, the design of the movie. We're getting that, intensity because he's naturally curious. And if we give him a prompt or have a piece of food hidden somewhere, or maybe there's a treat or tennis ball that he wants to get to, and there's kind of a puzzle he needs to solve, that's how we got some of his best performances. Sometimes we're also filming things that he does naturally. When I say he's a method actor, some of the best applications of that were the kind of scenes of, genuine love and affection between Todd and Indy. He and
Mhm.
I in the morning have a routine we do where he will walk in between my legs and I'll scratch his sides. We see Todd and Indy do this throughout the film, kind of as this bellwether to kind of let the audience know where they're at in their relationship
Yeah.
with the dead. If it ever looks like Todd and Indy, like they love each other, that dog just loves that guy. He does. That's me. That's my dog. He's only able to be himself. Um, Certainly, lots of filmmaking tricks are going into crafting this performance, but some of it is just real. That's how Indy is, especially the affection.
Yeah. Well, it definitely shows, and he's very expressive. I don't know if he's a very expressive breed or if that's just him, but I feel like that was one of the highest points of production value is how expressive the dog is.
There's a few things that I think are kind of his superpowers. It's that intense stare he has. And then something which I did not know was going to be as important as it was when I started is that he has visible pigment in his eye, which
Mhm.
all dogs have an eye like a person. They have an iris and a pupil and
Yep.
then whites to their eye. But depending on their pigment, a dog with a black nose, say, just will appear to usually just have like kind of like a doll's eye that just is dark, kind of like a horse or a cow or a donkey. But like you'll see this in other animals too, like cats, like who have pink noses will have these like colored eyes.
Mhm.
Indy has a colored eye and has an iris, and it makes him just a little bit more human. You
Yeah.
can you can read into what he's looking at and what we're suggesting he's feeling a little bit more, just by virtue of you can see both his pupil, his iris, and then I would always go out of my way to put a little ping light in the shot. This is a technique from it's used a lot in animation where inside the eye there's a little reflected dot that just draws the audience's focus to the character's eye. And for us, it just, draws the audience's point of view to Indy's best feature, his eyes, which is, perspective. That's the engine I mentioned that is kind of powering this whole narrative.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, my mom's dog is the same way. He's got very visible whites in his eyes, and he's got a
Yes.
brown nose, and he's very expressive. His eyes are like very human-like
Yes.
versus like just straight jet black shark eyes, which
Totally.
still
Exactly.
still
Yeah.
cute on a dog, but when you see visible whites in their eyes, they're very human-like.
Yeah. We were also always kind of searching for ways to make Indy more expressive. I've talked about this before, but people always ask, how did you get him to look scared? And the answer to that question is that we didn't do anything. The feeling of fear is created by the film. You, as the audience member, feel that and then project that onto him. The reality
Right.
of those scenes is that Indy is looking intensely, but blankly off camera, usually at me or my wife, making a silly noise or holding a piece of food to get him to look in just the perfect place. We then have a point of view shot of a dark corner where a shadow moves across the wall. There's horror movie music. You feel the tension and put the feeling onto Indy.
Yeah.
But there's also little practical things we would do. Um, it's not a coincidence that the scenes in the movie that are the lowest points for Indy, He's always wet. I don't know why, but a wet dog just kind of looks sad. It always gets a big gasp when there's a moment Indy disappears from the movie, and then when he shows back up and it's suggested he's been through some sort of ideal, he's covered in mud. And
Mhm.
audiences always go, if you think about that for just a minute,
Hmm.
do you think it was that hard to get my dog to roll around in mud?
Probably not.
Just no. He had the time of his life. But the absence of Indy, and then when he shows up and he's dirty, the filmmaking again tells you how to feel, and we kind of trick ourselves into creating that performance. So
Interesting.
yeah, it was a lot of fun to figure all that out.
Yeah. Well, what was the most challenging sequence?
You know, what's funny is the hardest scene, the hardest shot by far is what would have been the easiest if I'd been working with a human actor, which is a tight, dramatic close up. At the
Okay.
end of the film, there's a scene where Indy is wet and muddy again, and he and Indy and Todd are kind of just looking at one another, and it is the climax of the film. Um, Again, this is a spoiler alert, maybe, but
Hmm.
they're saying goodbye to one another, and it's just two characters looking at one another, and all I needed Indy to do was look at my hands and hold still for 5 seconds. For a dog, that is incredibly hard. We started on a Monday, shooting, and I mean, I didn't make my life easy. You know, like I had to get Indy, wet and muddy, which is not hard for him to do. But there's a wet dog on hand now. There's just me and my wife trying to film this. We film on a very dramatic, close up lens with a shallow depth of field, so focus is very hard to maintain. He needs to look in just the right place, and I need him to hold that look for like 5 to 8 seconds. But he was constantly moving around, bobbing. He's a dog. He doesn't understand he's in a movie. We started that on a Monday, didn't get it that day, tried again on a Tuesday. And I think by Wednesday, we got our usable footage. So just
Oh.
simple little close ups like that might be days of work.
I had a
Um,
feeling it'd be something very simple that, like, it wasn't the chase sequence or him jumping out of the window. It
oh my
was
gosh.
that.
Yes, movement is easy. It's actually controlling his movement was oddly enough one of the easier things to do. Um, I didn't mean to jump in, but just as by way of
No,
example,
please.
so much of his movement, as a character, he's following his nose, and the audience, I think, is putting two and two together that he's on the trail of this supernatural force. And to do that practically, we would just take his food and create a breadcrumb trail of
Oh.
crumbs and smells for him to follow. And it was so easy to repeat. We would just take his food and kind of make a path for him to move through the house and follow. He's very motivated. He's very smart. He's using his real sense of smell, not for the reason that we suggest in the film, but that was a piece of cake. And then the big roof jump you mentioned, that was actually his stunt double, fake Indy, Findy. Findy made the jump.
I had a feel. Yeah, I knew you're not throwing your dog out the window.
No, no.
I figured. Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. How did you get this fake? Did you go to a prop maker or a effects company or?
Yeah, it was one of these companies we just found on Instagram that makes, a stuffed animal version of your dog. We sent in
Okay.
photos of Indy, his measurements, his coloring. I went out of my way to, take pictures of Indy with like a color board to, to match him to. It's a pretty good, it's not one to one. It's not going to fool anybody if you especially saw them next to one another. But it came in handy a lot, especially, for the stunts, but then also, I mentioned Indy's attention span, needing to preserve it.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
used that stand in to kind of set up shots. When it came time to work with the actors to record the vocal performances, they worked with Findy just because real Indy would make so much noise. Yeah, it was a handy prop.
Yeah, I bet. It was really fun to see Uncle Larry show up in the movie. How did Larry Fessenden come to take part?
So we got introduced to him through a friend who was working on the movie. Actually, there's this horrifying kind of like tapestry in a needlepoint in the film of a dog battling like this like dark bear monster.
Yeah, it was really cool.
A friend of ours, Hannah Lamar, made that for us custom, just to kind of blend in with the other real, embroidery in the film. How that gets us to Larry is that she knew Larry. Um, she was showing him that piece she was making and telling him about our project. We got in touch. We needed somebody to play this grandpa role. We'd been filming. All of Indy's scenes were concluded at that point. We did all the human stuff. after filming with Indy for 3 years. So we picked up the Larry footage for Grandpa. We then added in the human voices at that same time. Um, yeah, so he came in kind of, right as we were getting into post, really. But then it was obviously an incredible presence, really makes his scene on camera and in the tapes you see in the film really memorable, and then has
Hmm.
been like an amazing cheerleader and advocate for the film too. That
That's
guy's just
great.
like the best.
Oh man, he is indie filmmaking and punk rock rolled into one human, and he's got a huge heart. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like the patron saint of like independent horror.
And I call him like the indie corpsman because he's launched the careers of Jim Mickle, Ty West,
Yeah.
number of other people. I think
Also
Wingard
like
worked with him in the
Stryker,
beginning.
yeah. He's it's not just horror. He's been doing this like with a lot of like, really interesting filmmakers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's awesome. It's always fun to see him show up in movies.
It's also great after 3 years of working with a dog who can't read a script and frequently doesn't do what you want him to do and can't hit a mark. You can tell Larry, I need you to die gruesomely, and you don't have to explain it anymore. It's just like, I got it.
He's done it before. Yeah, it
Yeah,
must
he
be
knows what he's
refreshing to
doing.
work with someone who can take direction. The movie had a great look to it. It didn't feel, and it was indie production, but it didn't feel. It felt like you had really great gear. Were you shooting with a Black Magic by any chance?
No, I was shooting with a Red. It's a Red
Okay.
camera. It's one of the first cameras that shot at 6K resolution, which was really important. This might be really in the weeds
No,
of
yeah, it's all good.
but we filmed at a higher resolution than the film is projected in. And what the reason that's so important, this is not uncommon, but the reason it was doubly important for us is that I mentioned before, Indy can't hit an exact mark, but the visual framing is so important that he can't hit the little piece of tape I put down, but he can hit like a vicinity that he'll land in a shot. Since I'm
Oh,
filming extra loose, I can then reposition in post to kind of compensate for his variability, shall we say.
oh, smart. So you could zoom in, zoom out, whatever you need.
Yes, and then there's the ability to reframe to kind of get the just what we're looking for. We couldn't do it on every shot, but we were able to rely on that a lot. And then I mean, the one of the jokes about Red cameras when they first came out is that they're very sturdily made, which was very important for a film where a dog like physically ran into a camera a lot.
Oh wow.
So that was good that it was a sturdy camera because yeah, Indy ran into it a few times.
Oh man, I bet. Okay, well that's cool. Did you just shot with one camera?
Yeah, so it was just one camera. I was also the cinematographer for the film. Um, and we actually, the lensing, the choices were as important as like what resolution and like camera system to film it on. Just because dogs, a canine protagonist, they have very different geometry than a human body, obviously. So what it allows you to do is you can film with a lot wider lenses, much closer to your character,
Mhm.
and not get kind of the unflattering effects that a super wide angle lens would have to a human face, for example. They have this nose that sticks out so much, longer. They've got these big ears. Um, I chose this very specific vintage set of Nikon originally photography lenses, but that had kind of a really interesting, organic, handmade look and some chromatic aberration that I
Oh,
really
nice.
enjoyed to kind of soften the digital edges. And then combined with that, they were very much tailored this set of lenses to a dog character. I think it makes the film, look, it makes it stand out. It's
Yeah.
doesn't. I was very okay that lots of this movie wouldn't look like or be like other movies. That extended everywhere. It was in the lenses, the camera, even the tripod. We had to get a lower kind of tripod just because Indy is so short.
Yeah, of
Most
course.
tripod systems are meant for human bodies, and Indy's only 19 inches tall, so that's not going to work. In the production design, when you're trying to find a dining room table that belongs in a haunted house, you don't normally look at as your first and most important factor, what do the legs look like? But that's the most important thing when your character is on the ground, the bed. And can I get under the bed with Indy? What's it look like under there? That's more important than what the headboard and the bed frame looks like. A lot of funny and unique considerations that we were always kind of embracing to make the film stand out.
Yeah, yeah. From the when I first started watching the movie, I just started paying really close attention to the camera work, it being from a dog's perspective and all those low angles and stuff like that. And yeah, I bet that was not a simple task. But I love the look of the movie. It felt like you really crafted something interesting.
Thank you,
Because
thank you.
it's why, and the aberration looked really, really cool. It's why I thought it was, because apparently Black Magic cameras are now used for very kind of dreamy, like sequences and stuff like that. But yeah, the overall look of the film I thought was great.
I gotta shout out my colorist, Jeff Sousa, who colored the film and really went the extra mile to make it seem like the film had a bigger crew than it did. He really, I mean, that's another advantage to shooting on digital now, is that, we don't exactly, it's not exactly a digital negative, but the film looks as rich and as detailed and specific so much because of that work. He covered up a lot of my mistakes and errors and things Indy forced me to do that I might not have done otherwise on
Yeah,
sets. It's an interesting ecosystem we're in now with, what can be done in post. I'm certainly not encouraging a fix it in post mentality to
sure.
filming. But if you can do things thoughtfully and know that you're going to have latitude in post production to kind of enhance or plus one your image, a
Yeah.
lot can be done to really make something stand out.
Nice. And do you have a DP background, or was this?
Yeah, so I've filmed a lot. I've worked as a camera operator. I'd worked as a commercial filmmaker, kind of as a one-man band for a long time, where I would film, edit, everything, kind of like right out of undergrads. This is years
Yeah.
ago, but I have a background, you know, being hands-on with cameras. I've been a B camera operator professionally. Um, and more than I would say cinematography, I've always had a hands-on kind of tech approach to filmmaking.
Hmm.
Before I, kind of was full-time making Good Boy, I'd been the creative director for an immersive media company. So I was shooting in 360. Um, I don't know if I'm like a master, but I, master of none, but proficient in a lot of things.
Sure,
So
sure.
very much put that to use here when I had to be most of the crew.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, it really looked fantastic. And what was your cinema diet like? I mean, I'm sure you're probably annoyed by any comparisons to In a Violent Nature, which I think they're only
Not at all.
comparable because they were very interesting and new takes on these well-trodden subgenres, that with the slasher, you with the supernatural. But as we all know, you started working on this way before that movie came out, so clearly no copycatting happening here. But what was
No,
your
no.
cinema diet like in terms of, like, were you looking at other movies that had different perspectives or that were really economical?
Yeah, so I think the films that I found most, influential are ones that use a similar visual storytelling and shot progression. So Hitchcock is a huge influence of mine. After Hitchcock, there's De Palma and Spielberg. You can
Yeah.
see how they're using shots, point of view perspective, the juxtaposition of objective and subjective shots, just that on its own to create meaning and tension without dialogue and even with minimal blocking and movement. So Psycho is a hugely influential film for me. Just, some of those scenes of, Abergast, the detective, moving through the house, trying to find, Mother. I was constantly looking at that, like how the camera being in just the right place is kind of creating a meaning for a character who is, especially in those old movies, they're not emoting a ton.
Yeah.
Um, and in Spielberg, certainly Jaws and Raiders, my dog is named Indy. That's not a coincidence. Like those movies are hugely influential, but I would say equally so, like Duel, like that's a
Mm.
movie which I don't know if this is apocryphal, but I heard a story that while making Duel, Spielberg is supposed to have said, just ask the cinematographer, how many more ways can we think of to shoot a truck? How many more ways could we film this truck and make it look scary? I did a similar exercise with
Mhm.
Indy. How many ways can I film Indy moving and have it be an additive, storytelling benefit or escalate the story somehow? Um, so yeah, I would say that kind of filmmaking was like really influential for the practical making of it. And then in terms of my horror diet, I'm watching horror movies all the time, but I think kind of like the big haunted house movies were really important. Um, The Shining, obviously, there's a lot of connective DNA there. I mentioned at the top that I even started doing all this, recreating scenes from The Shining with Indy. There's DNA from The Shining all over this movie. but also, The Innocents, a
Oh
more
yeah, love that movie.
dated, love that movie. Um, Again, very focused point of view driven story. We're only with that one woman, and every shot is either of her or from her point of view.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
The first person I heard mention that as a strategy for horror movie filmmaking was Sam Raimi, and he was talking about Drag Me to Hell, where his goal was every shot in Drag Me to Hell is either of Alison Lohman, I think is her name, the
Mhm.
actress who's the main character. Every shot is either of her or from her character's point of view.
I thought you were gonna tell me Evil Dead 2 was like that from Ash's perspective or of Ash, but I suppose not.
I guess it's not because we do cut away. We certainly cut away to the woman who shows up when she like gets to the airport with her
Yeah, that's
yeah.
true, that's true.
But there's a huge section of Evil Dead 2 where it's like it's a one man show.
Mhm. Oh,
Which
yeah.
I don't know if I was thinking about that movie while making Good Boy, but that's certainly in my DNA.
You got a cabin and, some supernatural fuckery afoot, so yeah.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
can't it's unavoidable at that point, yeah. Yeah. Have you seen anything lately that has, excited you horror-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the I don't know if people know about Man Finds Tape, but I caught that at um the Sitges Film Festival. Really cool. That'll be coming. So probably shouldn't mention a movie that is like yet to come out
Oh,
in
it's
theaters,
okay, it's
but
alright.
caught that.
Put it on the
Super
radar.
cool. Um, I'm always also going like back in time, I think, to look at movies.
So important.
This is going to sound so pretentious, but there's a really cool thriller kind of espionage spy movie I just rewatched called Dossier 51.
Okay.
Um, it's point of view driven. It's almost like a proto found footage movie, but like from an espionage perspective. That was super awesome. Um, yeah, not at all similar, the two references I just dropped there, but cool movies.
Nice, okay, well, that's good to know. Well, as I told you at the top, one of the big intentions of the show is to make the idea of filmmaking accessible to people. And I feel like your story very much does that. And you told me you don't mind if I ask you about the budget of the film. Are you comfortable sharing the budgetary range that you were working within?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can share the film was shot on a budget. The simplest way to explain it is the budget was what I had in my bank account, and the schedule was how much time my wife and I could put into this. In the end, the film, to get it to South by and get it to distribution and into the world, we shot it on a budget of $70,000.
Wow.
So there's a lot of reasons that a lot of things had to go right and align to make that possible. Money was not the most important resource in making this film, which is kind of hard for some people to understand or like grapple with for thinking about their own projects. But we found a way to live in that house, support. We had jobs to support ourselves that we were working as we were making the film, and the main star works for free.
It works
So
for
and
treats.
yeah, and we owned all of our own equipment. I those short films I had made to kind of get started had yielded us, we won these prizes for these short film contests where that's how we got the camera, that's how we
Yeah.
got most of the gear, so there weren't rental costs. Um, we just kind of had an allowance to make the movie. So yeah, so I don't know the exact number, but it's under $70,000.
Oh, wow. That's
Was
great.
the budget it was shot on to get it to South by Southwest.
That's very, very impressive and inspirational. And I before I forget, I wanted to touch on sound design because
Oh, yes. Half the movie,
yeah,
so important.
so important. What was the approach?
So I should also mention part of the reason this film worked is that Brian Goodhart, who is a co-producer, and then he's one of the mixers and sound designers, but really the marshal of the post sound team. He was involved from before any rolling had happened, before we even moved into that house, because we knew that a big challenge with making this movie is that all the production audio isn't going to be useful.
Mhm.
So there's a savings there for every day of filming. I don't have to pay for a sound recordist, but there's going to be a cost that comes due in post when every sound has to be rebuilt from scratch. The
Yeah.
entire soundscape, every footstep Indy takes, every swish of his tail, every jingle of his collar, all of the human dialogue gets recorded, re-recorded after, because it's my body. I'm not an actor. We need to actually have a performance on top of this whole thing. So it was this huge monumental task to recreate everything. And fortunately, Brian and then his collaborator Kelly Usman, that was the sound team that kind of put it all together. Even as I was, wrapping edit, we brought in our composer, Sam Bose Miller. They worked very much hand in hand, the creative and practical sound design and music. And then also we had a music producer, Eric Saris. You know, we kind of had this philosophy that everything should be holding hands. It should all be of the same scope. There's times where I feel like the music sounds like sound design. There's times where the sound design is a little bit musical.
Yeah.
I think that ambiguity is really interesting and kind of unsettling for the audience. I can't speak highly enough about the post sound team. They, not dissimilarly use time as a resource. We were able to, because they'd been working on it for a while as a passion project, we're able to really, it's a small but mighty team that pulled it together. I think so it was Brian, Kelly, Eric, Sam, and then I'm gonna blank. There was only one other musician who we brought in. So it's like 5 people was our entire post sound team. Um, yeah. A small but mighty team indeed.
Wow. Yeah, it was so effective. And I feel like with a movie like this, it is even more critical because there's not a lot of dialogue, a lot of shots of a dog and a
Yeah.
very expressive dog, but still you need that sound to push things. And, the movie, very, very suspenseful, very scary, there were a lot of emotional moments in it. The sound really, beautifully carried it along, obviously with Indy and the filmmaking and all of that. But it's such an important ingredient. So yeah, your team did a beautiful job.
They very much embrace the idea that limitations are a benefit. That was totally a case for every part of the filmmaking. Indy as a point of view character is very limiting. We can't even see human faces for, most of the film because the film is at his level. We
Yeah.
embrace that as a practical and creative positive because I'm standing as the body. I can't act. Great. But in the sound and especially music world, we had an idea of could we have the musical world of Good Boy be, kind of have a similarly creative, fulfilling, but practical limitation? Could we limit the number of instruments? I think there can sometimes be a dissonance, especially if you ever watch a movie where they have music from a library.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a dissonance because there'll be a big orchestral score for a very small handmade movie,
Right.
and that doesn't always create a dissonance. But we just tried, like, what if we did this where we're just working with 5 instruments? So Sam, the composer, is playing a cello. There's a rotating kind of assortment of things he's bringing in. But the coolest instrument, which I think makes some of the most haunting sounds, is an instrument he built from scratch out of cello strings, kind of put onto a lathe that you crank like an organ grinder. He called
Whoa.
it a chalacillator. So if you're ever watching the movie and you hear this kind of rhythmic, almost like haunting whir, that's the chalacillator that Sam built from scratch to make the score of this movie.
The
So that doesn't hurt
Velociraptor.
either.
Oh wow, that's super cool. He was inventing his own horror instruments. That's amazing. It's the only
Yeah.
genre I feel like you can do that.
Totally. But it's also, we're not the first horror movie where a composer, built a new instrument. It's one of the few genres where audiences will tolerate something like that, let alone see it as a huge benefit because
Yeah.
you can make these nightmare-inducing sounds with this stuff.
Yeah, because you want these otherworldly, visceral sounds.
Yep.
It would work in sci-fi, maybe certain dramas, but horror is where all of that really comes into hand. It's really smart that you guys did a really limited palette of instruments. Considering the smaller nature of the perspective, it
Mhm.
just being of a dog, one location, it just makes it feel so much more cohesive. So a lot of care
Totally.
was brought to that. That's really cool. Well, cool, man. What is next for you? What are we looking at in terms of potential sequel? Good Boys? Is he got a
Good boys. I
or,
haven't thought of it that way. Yeah, more dogs. That would
or
be
Good Boy 2 Golden Receiver?
golden
I don't know.
receiver. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I do have more ideas of animal storytelling. Whether it's with Indy, I think, he may be
He's being really
retired.
cute right now, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say
He's hamming it up. He's like, I better be in that
openly
sequel. Look at
retired
him.
right now. But I think I found this really unique way to work with animals and with dogs, just through the visual storytelling that I would love to return to at some point. I'm very committed that movie number 2 not be about an animal,
Sure.
that it have a human actor who agrees that he is indeed in a movie, or she. Um, and can read a script and, follow instructions
It'll
and
be refreshing for you.
yeah, agrees on the reality of the premise of what we're doing. But I think perspective is always going to be a big part of my storytelling, using point of view characters really specifically, embracing limitations. I read a lot of scripts and I'm, thinking about ways to adapt things. I think horror, especially, which maybe that's another way I could have answered your question more, quickly. I will make another horror movie. And my goal will be to make it scary, make it personal, make it relatable, and try and bring something to it people have never seen before. I love tropes in horror movies. I think they're an asset, not a challenge. It's good that the audience understands when Good Boy begins that this is a haunted house and a dark and stormy night, and that's a kind of character I've seen in other movies. That the dog who knows better, who that's weird, he won't go into the basement. That's not a problem. That's a benefit. And then running with it in a totally new direction, that's the thing that excites me the most.
Really, really cool. Well, you certainly did something new, fresh, and different here and inventive, played off our very established horror movie or haunted house trope, but did it very, very differently. So this is super refreshing and huge congratulations. I'm really, really happy for you. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much. This has been a really fun conversation.
Well, before we wrap up, any parting advice for those aspiring horror directors out there?
I think what I'd say is find something you can do better than anybody else, or maybe only you would do, and do that thing as hard as you can.
Mm.
Other people, I'm sure, could have made a movie with their dog if they just had the time and the bandwidth to do it. For me, designing the production around what I could do and what indie could do was the key to getting it made. So everyone has something special about them or some unique story. It's okay if it's small and specific, as long as it's, unique and, stands out, to you.
Awesome. That is great. Figure out what you can do and do it as hard as you can. All
Yep.
right. I'm going to take that to heart. Ben, thanks again. This was great.
Of course. Thank you.